Who are the top 5 defensive players for the Dallas Cowboys heading into the 2023 season? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys. Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, we talked about your top 5 offensive players on yesterday's podcast. Please go check it out. Today, we're talking about your top 5 defensive players. Did you get any criticism for your list yesterday?
I mostly tried to stay off Twitter. I did go to the YouTube comments and just to see if there was some confusion. I think there was a little bit. One person who was a little upset that I didn't include Dak on the list, and I had to remind him, hey, that Dak was not eligible for this list. And I will again remind everyone that the 5 that I picked in the original Cowboys top 5 are ineligible here. So no Micah Parsons, no Stephon Gilmore on this remaining top 5 defenders list.
That doesn't mean that there's not talent, because I cannot wait to dive into this list, Landon, because, again, there is some really good players that are going to be left off. So let's jump right into your number 5 player for the Cowboys on defense going into the season is?
My number 5 player going into the season is Malik Hooker. I think there has been some discussion that about these. There's been a lot of talk about these 3 safeties, and I think that as you know, we've been talking about trying to re-sign Donovan Wilson in the offseason. There's been a lot of discussion about the Jaron Kearse role and his position. I think that sometimes Malik Hooker is the kind of forgotten guy of this trio, and to be fair, I think he shouldn't be forgotten. I think he may be the most talented of the 3. He is a guy who came into the league with by far the most pedigree, and then had kind of some injury issues that continued, and he had some of that in college as well. He was obviously, we've talked about, one of my favorite all-time safety prospects coming out from Ohio State. Just a super immensely talented player. Struggled in Indy with injuries, he played some good football early on and then got injured and kind of struggled to regain form. It feels like last year was Malik Hooker fully realized, right? Like, he's healthy. He played a full season. He played, I think, close to 1,000 snaps last year, was good in coverage, good against the run, just a very solid all around free safety. And it's a position that doesn't quite get the same sort of high profile regard that it may have in previous years with the prevalence of single high safety and the kind of Earl Thomas types in the league. But I think that his play last year really allowed players in front of him to play free. And to make plays while he kind of continued to provide a safe cover behind them. I think Malik Hooker had a really good season last year, and I think it's time he got a little bit of his due.
Yeah, I think he's an awesome player, and he might not be the best safety on the roster, but I think he's the hardest to replace, right? Like, they just don't have another free safety on this team that can do the things that he can do in coverage. So I've got no problem with it here. I also want to knock on wood a little bit with his health, right? Like, he's played a lot of games over the last 2 years, and you're hoping, like, the more he plays, the more tolerance he can kind of build up from injuries, right? Like, if you're missing time, it's really hard to, like, withstand the bumps and bruises of the NFL if you're not used to playing. But hopefully with Malik Hooker, we're past the injury woes, because he's still a fairly young player. I don't have his age in front of me right now, but he's probably 27.
I think he's 27.
Yeah, 27, 28 years old. Man, what a fun player. And I'm glad that the Cowboys were able to bring him back on a nice deal, and that he's part of this defense. Just a really good player. Who's number 4?
Number 4 is Odigizua. Osa Odigizua. Here's the thing. I think, again, I want to remind everyone that this is about where we think the players are right now, right? And I think Osa is ready for another big step. After the last 2 years, he came in, played really good football for a rookie playing defensive tackle. I thought he had a nice year last year. He was asked to play a ton of snaps because the Cowboys just didn't have anyone else who was that type of 3 technique. Until later in the season when you saw a little bit of Golston kind of getting an opportunity to play more there with and playing well. So he ended up playing just a ton of snaps. And I think by the end of the year, just was probably exhausted after all the snaps he was playing.
Worn down, for sure.
Yeah. And then after the injuries, at other defensive tackle spots, that just meant that he had to play more, honestly. So I think that there has been some kind of cobbling together with his backup, as we've talked about, by reducing down some defensive ends to the under tackle spot to kind of give him some snaps. But I think all of those snaps these last few years and the opportunity to kind of reflect on that and grow some more. Usually year 3 is kind of where you see these guys start to take a big jump. So I expect Osa to kind of take another step forward. And I think that he played really, really well last year. And it was kind of tough to see just because he wasn't surrounded by a ton of talent at different points at defensive tackle. And he kind of had to take on ownership of the middle of that defense at the line of scrimmage.
I just thought he was so much better, even as a pass rusher, as a run defender. He made more splash plays. It seemed like, again, we're not talking about like a Pro Bowl caliber player here or anything, but just a really solid defensive tackle who the Cowboys have kind of been missing for the last couple of years. And now, hopefully with Mozzie Smith, and some of the other additions on the defensive line, like you can get even a little bit more out of him. But man, I'm excited about him in year 3. I cannot wait to watch him again in this defense.
Yeah, and I do, and I think that a step is coming, right? And like he wasn't a Pro Bowler last year, but I do think that he could take a step that could put him in that conversation this year, especially with better talent surrounding him and him not having to eat so many double teams as he did at different points last year.
Yeah, well, and again, they brought back Jonathan Hankins. That should help a little bit, maybe to take off some of the double teams, to take out of the nose tackle snaps. Because remember, earlier in the year, they were playing him a lot as like the 1 or the 0, and that's too much to ask for him for his body size, type. So
he's undersized. I mean, as it is, like he's probably more of a 290 guy. I mean, he plays with great strength and incredible leverage. I mean, we talked about his wrestler background at different points, but I mean, there's just a certain point when you can wear a guy out like that. And like we said, they just didn't have anyone else who could kind of play the way he did. I mean, they had to cobble it together with other positions basically to kind of get quality play here. And that's, more of an indictment on the Tristan Hill and Neville Gallimores, especially now Neville Gallimore of the world. So the Cowboys still need to kind of find a better solution here at getting more of a rotation to kind of alleviate things. But I do think having Mozzie Smith here to kind of be there when Jonathan Hankins is out, I think that will just help that rotation and help draw attention away from him. Just give Osa a little bit easier time and better matchups on a week-to-week basis than he faced last year.
And if Chauncey Golston can play some more snaps inside, or maybe Junior Fajoku can take some of the 3 technique snaps, just so that you don't have to play Osa 45, 50 snaps a game, because that's what he was playing early in the year.
Yeah.
And you could see he was wearing down. Keep him in that 30, 35 range, and you're going to get a heck of a player. So let's get to your 3rd ranked player next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. I am taking the Denver Nuggets to win the NBA championship. Shocking, right? After they completely dominated the Lakers. There's no better place to bet on all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Every dayers. Tomorrow on the show, we have Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus to break down all of the Cowboys offseason moves and to discuss what this team looks like going into the 2023 season. So make sure you guys are tuning in for that. All right, Landon, who is your number 3 defensive player heading into the year?
Well, number 3 heading into the season is Leighton Vander Esch. I think that we had come to kind of be disappointed in some of the play that Leighton had post his rookie season, right? Like, it just felt like he got injured. When he came back from his injury, it just felt like it was just not the same player that you saw, just, kind of had taken a step down. And you felt like, and we weren't sure that we were going to kind of get a player back on that trajectory again. I think what you saw last year is that he still has that ability to move around and make this defense right. And there are different points when the linebacker group was a little bit shaky, but he was able to kind of make things right in a way that the Cowboys defense really needed. He was incredible in coverage. And I think he where you still haven't kind of seen him go back to his rookie year yet is as a run defender.
Yeah.
But I do think that the addition of having Mozzie Smith come back in and kind of help plug things up front is going to allow him to do that a little bit better. Look, we've talked about it, like, getting off blocks has never been something that he has been exceptional at. Even in college at Boise State, he was told to kind of just rip through and get around things and then just try to get past the blockers. So I think having another big defensive tackle in the middle to kind of keep him clean will even potentially take his game back up to another level. So this is really just kind of a conversation starting off point to appreciate what Leighton Vander Esch did for the team last year, because I think it was a really good year for him last year. And it was kind of a showing that he is still a very valuable player at the position. And I think that the idea of kind of keeping him clean on the second level with this new defensive tackle, maybe with some improved linebacker play around him, I think it's really going to help him kind of take his next step and kind of get back to closer that sort of all pro trajectory you saw starting his rookie season.
I don't know if he's one of the top, 7 or 8 or 9 players on the Cowboys, but he's going to be one of their most important this year, because you mentioned the other linebackers around him. While we like a lot of those guys, I mean, there's not a proven name next to him, right? It's Damone Clark, who played half of a season last year. It's Devin Harper, who didn't play at all last year. It's Jabril Cox, who's played like 50 career defensive snaps. In Overshawn, who is a 3rd-round converted safety playing linebacker. Like, that is your entire linebacking core with Leighton Vander Esch. So they need him to play healthy, or just to stay healthy and play well, because there's just not a lot of other proven commodities on this roster.
Yeah, and I think that and he's up for it, and I think that that's the kind of thing is that just shows you exactly how good his season was last year. Is that he was basically the only proven linebacker that was under the age of 30, and so he was able to kind of take on that role of not only like the leader, but like the main driving force at the second level outside of Curse. So I think that it shows you just how far Leighton Vander Esch has kind of come back from a kind of disappointing sophomore season.
So just looking at your list right now, we've got Malik Hooker at 5. We've got Oso Digizua at 4. We got Leighton Vander Esch at 3. I kind of made like a little list here of some of the names that I would consider.
Your shadow team?
Kind of, yeah. There's some good players that I know for sure aren't going to be on this list, and we'll have to talk about them in a little bit. But I got a feeling I know who is at number 2. Can you give us the name, Landon?
Yeah, I mean, shout out to our buddy John Owning, because of course number 2 is going to be DeMarcus Lawrence. Look, I just think that let's not talk about the player for a second. Let's just talk about the fact that this guy was willing to take a contract renegotiation to help his team get better free agencies to surround himself, and then he goes out and plays maybe his best season in 2 or 3 years. So DeMarcus Lawrence still is a dominant force when he's allowed to kind of play a reasonable snap count. And I guess we talked about this with Cooks, with Gilmore, with some of these folks. When you get these veterans who have been like the man at their position for most of their career, they get a little bit advanced in age, and then you put them in a situation where they're not required to be the man anymore. That there's another guy who can kind of take the top end, can take all the focus, and now suddenly you're lining up the Gilmores, Brandon Cooks, and DeMarcus Lawrence's of the world against the second best offensive tackle or defender or whatever, right? That is where you get those kind of really great results. You got a guy who's experienced, who's going against someone who's less talented with him. He's getting less attention. And I think you saw that kind of play out with DeMarcus Lawrence. When he was on the field, he was dominating folks, especially in the run game. Like, he may be the best run defender maybe in football.
I agree.
And I think that you combine that with the fact that he's going to get you somewhere between 6 to 8 sacks, somewhere between 35 to 40 pressures. I think that's the kind of thing you need from a defensive end who is not necessarily your main sack artist at this point. He's just another force on the defensive line that is going to wreck a game plan. And Lawrence, was a playmaker, was a splash creator. I mean, it's not even just the sacks and the runs. He forced fumbles, he recovered them. He just made plays. I mean, he's always been a guy that has been clutch. And when you needed him to, when he needed a big play, DeMarcus Lawrence since his rookie year when he punched out a fumble in the playoffs against the Lions, you knew that he was going to be able to produce a play when you really, really needed one.
The other thing that I would say about him is it just seems like when he gets a matchup where he is clearly the better guy, he takes advantage of it. I remember last year, I think it was the Monday night game against the Giants. He was going up against Evan Neal, the rookie right tackle for the Giants, and just destroyed him. I mean, just absolutely destroyed him to the point where the Giants couldn't do anything on offense. And it's not very often that he gets super favorable matchups like that, partly because it seems like the NFC has a lot of really good right tackles, and that's just where he lines up at. But those are the kind of games where it's like, let's not forget why this guy was one of the highest paid defensive ends in the league just a few years ago. Why he's, I think, 4th or 5th all time right now in Cowboy sacks in franchise history. Just an awesome player. And now I know we didn't mention some guys like Sam Williams and Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler, but with those guys all playing well, it allows DeMarcus Lawrence to be even more rested to help him get through the season. I expect him to have another really good season.
I do too. Yeah. I mean, I think they've done everything they need to do to kind of protect him so that he's not, in years past, there was times when he was you had to have him on every single snap, you had to have him on the field. And when you didn't, the defense was lost. So I think the fact that the Cowboys are in a situation now where they can judiciously deploy him as needed. And when he's not on the field, you've got a veteran pass rusher who also is good for 5 or 6 sacks a season, or a very strong up and coming young player who, is probably the heir apparent at the position in a couple of years. So the Cowboys are in a good situation to really give DeMarcus Lawrence the best opportunity to put his best foot forward.
Again, knocking on wood, but outside of the broken foot that he had in 2021, he's been on the field a lot. Like, just look at 2017, 16 games, 18, 16, 19, 16, 20, 16, 21, 7. And then he started and played all 17 games last season. Like, it's been a knock on him in the past, but I think he's figured out a way to get past some of the back injury stuff that he had early in his career and, stay on the field for the most part.
And if I'm not mistaken, he actually was kind of going through a foot thing last year a little bit.
Able to play through it. Yeah,
it was able to play through it, and I think that has everything to do with the fact that they had guys to deploy whenever he needed to take the time off to make the foot feel right. So that kind of management of him, and look, that's a smart play by a veteran defensive end. He gave up a little bit of money, but he understood that by doing that, the Cowboys were able to give him some help so that he could extend his career and actually play longer. So it was a good win for both sides.
He's going to end up being one of these guys that plays like 12 to 13 years, all with the same team, which is just unheard of in today's NFL. Landon, let's talk about your number 1 ranked player, not named Micah Parsons or Stephon Gilmore, next. All right, just to recap Landon's top 5 players, we've got Malik Hooker, we've got Osa Odighizuwa at 4, we've got Leighton Vander Esch at 3, at number 2 we've got DeMarcus Lawrence, and then obviously the top guys, Micah Parsons, Stephon Gilmore off the board. Before you reveal number 1, who I think everybody knows who it's going to be, I gotta say, I'm kind of surprised that Donovan Wilson or Jaron Kearse didn't make this list.
Yeah, honestly, I think they were, all the way up into the end. I was trying to debate whether or not Hooker or Kearse or Wilson would be on this list. I think for me, I think Donovan Wilson plays his position incredibly well. I think both of these guys are given very specialized positions, which really help accentuate what they do well. Yes. I think Malik Hooker, to me, is a guy who could play any of those positions as well as what he does as well. And I think that's why I put him there.
I will say, I think I would have had Donovan Wilson on the list just because he gives them some energy on defense and he's kind of the igniter on defense for them. But he's also a little bit more high variance than some of the other safeties, right? He's going to miss the occasional tackle and the occasional coverage assignment, but I do value his playmaking quite a bit. So with that being said, and also no Deron Bland, what a hater. At number 1, Landon, you have?
Well, to be fair here, like when we mentioned Stephon Gilmore as my number 5, top 5, I really, really kind of wanted to number 5 to be a shared spot between Stephon Gilmore and obviously Trevon Diggs. Yes. Trevon Diggs being the number 1 player here. Because to me, it's not necessarily that Gilmore is better than Diggs. It's that I think they're kind of at very similar stages of their career, just headed in different directions, and Gilmore is not falling off a cliff or anything like that. I think his career is mostly plateaued as he's reached his advanced stage. I think it's just Diggs is playing better and better football as the years have gone on. Obviously, he had 10 plus interceptions just a few years ago. Didn't quite have that same count last year, but I think he played better football last year.
He was better snap to snap, without a doubt. There's no way you can argue that.
And I just think that the coverage, you raise the floor on the coverage while still remaining to be an interception threat. I think the fact that he has those interceptions in his career is still something that quarterbacks have to think about when throwing his way, and that they always will have to think about when throwing his way. I just think that his overall game improved in ways that it needed to, and that he needed to kind of take a step back. His stickiness in coverage, he's not taking as many risks, and when he is taking risks, they're a little bit more calculated. So I think Trevon Diggs is still one of the top players in this league, and I think he's really dangerous to throw the football at. Adding Stephon Gilmore to the other side is probably going to make things only more dangerous for quarterbacks, because they don't really have good answers. And now you're going to be forced to kind of throw that direction a little bit more than you probably would have previously, which again may drive the more interceptions back his way. So I think, for me, I could have easily put Gilmore. I could have easily put Diggs as the number 5 overall guy and then put Gilmore here. I think it's probably pretty interchangeable at this point. But I think with Diggs, this is a guy that kind of is the straw that stirs the drink in the pass defense on the back end. It's even for the pass rush. I mean, I think Micah Parsons is obviously Micah Parsons, but when Parsons isn't on the field and they're still getting interceptions and sacks, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there are quarterbacks who are a little bit hesitant to throw the ball on the left side because there's number 7 over there kind of watching and waiting for him to throw the football. So all it takes is a quarterback to look over there, see 7 looking at him, double clutch the football a little bit, try to look to the other side, and then suddenly DeMarcus Lawrence is coming late in the snap to sack you. So I think Diggs has proven his worth. Yep. And I think that last year he proved his worth even further by being more nuanced with harder to kind of identify play. Yep. That actually in the long run resulted in better overall coverage and him becoming a better overall corner.
I won't be surprised if this is Trevon Diggs' best year of his career coming up for a lot of different reasons. It's a 3rd year in Dan Quinn's defense, right? It's his, I think this is his 6th year playing cornerback, right? Because he only played 2 years at Alabama. This will be his 4th year in the NFL. The pass rush should be absolutely ridiculous with Micah Parsons and all the other guys up front. And now you've got a veteran like Stephon Gilmore that he can lean on and he can learn in the classroom with. And the fact is, I don't think teams are going to throw on Gilmore all that often. So Diggs is going to get plenty of chances. And if he can remain consistent like he was last year and pick off 6 passes, which I don't think is unrealistic for him at all, you're talking about another all-pro season coming up. So again, I will not be surprised if this is the best year we ever see Diggs play.
Yeah, and look, I mean, they are trying to funnel things his direction. The Cowboys want you to throw the football at Diggs because they know that the ball, when it's coming his way, is a 50-50 ball between the Diggs and the receiver. So it's by shutting off other avenues, by shutting off the hey, you don't have the chance to wait late in the snap because our pass rush is coming. Hey, you don't have the opportunity to throw to the other side of the field because Stephon Gilmore is over there.
Yep.
I think it shows you that hey, they're trying to get you to throw that ball at Diggs so they can get the opportunities to take the ball away.
The other thing we saw in the second half of the year last year is the Cowboys just had no cornerbacks, right? So it was you're going to throw at Diggs, or would you rather throw at Mackenzie Alexander or Trayvon Mullen or Xavier Rhodes or whoever? Right. I mean, whoever else was out there on that side. Now, with at least you have Gilmore, probably Deron Bland and Jordan Lewis competing for slot snaps. You just have way more depth, and defenses aren't going to have an easy offenses aren't going to have an easy target to throw to every single time. So again, I expect a career year for Trevon Diggs. So, Landon, good job on your list. We won't make you do one of these again for a while. But everybody, we want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day. Again, tomorrow on the show, Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus will be here talking about the Cowboys offseason. Make sure you guys tune in for that. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. We'll see you guys next time.